everyone, and welcome to an Eto podcast, spoiler cast, probably, of God of War Ragnarok.
Is it a spoiler cast if the game came out like 3 or 4 months ago?
Yeah. So right off the bat, we're a bit late.
Yeah,
We're a bit late.
a little bit.
I can't really blame myself or Sam. It's really entirely on Josh.
It is. This is true. This is extremely true.
Yeah. So you have finished the game as of this week?
About a week ago, I think.
Yeah, totally. Cool. So Josh is also the freshest on the game of all of us. So we'll have to rejig our memories for a lot of it.
That's right.
But
and as always, I will have the least opinions.
yeah, totally. But it's good because I've wanted to talk about this game for a while. I enjoyed it a lot when I played it back in November a few months ago. And I made sure I was like, at the time, as soon as Josh finishes the game, we'll do a podcast about it. And in that space of time, Sam also finished the game. So we roped Sam on in for this one as well.
We've never had this lineup of people.
No, we've never had this lineup of people. That's true.
This is a first.
That's true. There's no Will. I mean, Will is technically in here messing over the recording, but he doesn't get to say anything. He doesn't care. Only we care about all the myriad of characters in God of War. Many characters in this game. A lot. We're mostly going to talk spoilers, but we'll do a little spoiler-free section at the top. If for some reason you haven't played this game and are watching this podcast, should we start? Yeah, why for one? Let's just start with like overall thoughts about the game. Probably start with Josh because he's the freshest, and that'll probably rejig Sam and my memory as we go along. So we're gonna go right to left, which is a bit weird, but we'll deal with it.
Fair. That's fair. All good. So of course, I really enjoyed it. It ended in a way that I was not expecting, because I was totally expecting some other stuff to happen. We'll get into it later. Based on what I'd seen on the internet, I didn't have any of this spoiled at all. I saw no one talking about this game. And based on what was happening in the game, I was like, it's definitely leading there. And then it just didn't, which is fine. It was nice to not...
Is it fine, Josh?
But yeah. It was nice to have not guessed the ending in the first few hours of the game. And like the first couple of weeks of little bits of what people were saying on the internet, but whatever. I loved sort of... There's so much emotion in the story with certain characters dying and, reuniting characters with other characters and things like that was very cool. I did pretty much every like major side mission, like story related side mission, as I was going, and I loved some of those. Some of the stories were just like beautiful and heartbreaking and thought-provoking. Almost more interesting and thought-provoking than the game, like the main story. Yeah,
which is not saying the main story is bad. It's just saying how good those side quests are. They are, like in my opinion, some of the best side quests in video games.
Absolutely, so worth playing. For sure. And like in terms of mechanics and stuff, I think I said this early on in a catch up around when I started playing it, but I really liked that the skill tree. You sort of like unlock your abilities, and then you can improve those abilities by using that ability more and more and more. Until you get it to like a gold standard, and then it gives you the chance to like add an extra stun or extra damage or whatever to that particular ability every time you use it. I thought that was like a really cool kind of creative way to make you play around with all the different abilities that you had.
It also rewards
way of leveling.
Yeah, in this kind of game, people come across their favorite abilities and favorite attacks and tend to like roll with them and combo them. And I feel like where a lot of games don't necessarily reward you for doing that, or often try to like push you away from doing that, this game is flat out saying like, no, if you like one ability, let's just make it better for you. Let's let you upgrade it and that kind of thing. And I think that's cool. It's acknowledging what the player is actually going to do when they
Yes.
play the game, because very few
Yeah.
people are going to go around trying all the abilities and remembering all the combos. You just find one thing, you stick to it. So yeah, no, I agree. That was cool little touch.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, because of that, and because I love leveling and watching numbers go up and stuff like that, I did keep jumping into the skill tree and looking at the ones that I hadn't upgraded yet, and then learnt new movesets and worked out how to integrate those into my playing and stuff. So I did feel like I was getting better because I was using more of the button combinations and stuff to actually do different things, which I think sometimes I accidentally did but didn't know what that was.
Yeah, totally.
Like certain sort of like, dodge and then attack real quickly kind of combinations and things. But yeah, I loved that sort of extra little bits of mechanic. And then there's like, there's fun little lore things that you collect over time. The best ones, I think, were the poems. Which are references to other PlayStation exclusive games.
Totally.
So poems about Horizon Zero Dawn and the robot games and zombie games and Uncharted.
I feel like
and
I had
so good.
I feel like the first game had something like this as well. I just can't remember exactly what it was. But yeah, it's a very cool little mechanic that you don't necessarily immediately realize, but then you like take a closer look at one of them and you're like, oh my goodness, and then you go back and look at the rest of them and you're like trying to work out which games each of them are.
Yeah, there's like a little symbol on the front of the thing that sort of represents that game as well. Like there's a little Astrobot on the front of. Yeah,
that was the one where I first noticed, because I was like, that's Astrobot, and then I had a proper look.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of it. And I did love. I just want to quickly, before I forget, because otherwise I'll forget if I don't say it now. And we've already referenced other PlayStation exclusives. There was one. I'm doing a bunch of post-game stuff at the moment, so I am still playing the game. But there was one little comment from Mimir to Kratos saying, like, tell me, is it true that you're in like this huge competition at some stage? Like all these different people from different worlds? He's like, yeah, it is true. And then they say, with princesses and Ruffigans and whatever. Sort of reference different people that you can attribute to these different games in PlayStation All Stars or whatever.
The failed Super Smash Bros. Clone.
Pretty much.
Totally.
Which is just like a really fun little reference. So there's just little bits of that sprinkled throughout. Loved it. Loved it.
Very good. Very good. I said we're going to go right to left, but we're actually going to go right, then left, then middle. Sam, you're next.
Me?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I was really keen for this game to come out. Like me and my younger brother loved the one that came out a few years ago. So we were really, really keen for this and just where the story was going to go in terms of the characters and all that sort of stuff. I think my favorite thing was just that the game had a lot of heart and emotion in it. We uncover a lot of stuff about a lot of characters that I was not expecting, and there's so many moments where I was either like, holy shit, or feeling like I needed to cry. So I thought that was a really, really great aspect of the game. My only complaint is after playing it a second time around, the gameplay can be a little bit repetitive in some ways. But I mean, when you're playing it the first time around, you don't really get that feeling enough for it to draw you away from the game.
It
for
almost
me anyway.
It feels like that combat loop is balanced to around one playthrough, where it's just not enough to get annoying, and you're getting enough new stuff that it's just feeding you enough that you're like not getting bored of it and just wanting to skip through it. But then, like, I can imagine on a second playthrough, it's like, oh, I've been there, done that. I just want to get to the other stuff.
Totally.
And especially I think like so soon after finishing it the first time as well, because it's only been out for a few months and you've already played it twice.
I think it was about. I think I had about a month in between, like replaying like the entire game again. But I think the first time around, something that definitely kept me going more was just how vast the environments were in each of the realms and the maps. I can't remember what realm it was, but just when you think you're almost like you've almost, covered everything, you uncover an area called the Crater, and that's just a whole other ball game of madness. So yeah, the game definitely implemented a lot of aspects that I really enjoyed. And for certain characters, I was really, really happy by the end of it, of where their story kind of ends for this game. But yeah, overall, very, very good.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, you guys have said similar sentiments across the board, which is why we're talking about this game.
Cool.
I freaking love this game. I think it just on the top level is just a phenomenal technical achievement. The fact that this game works in any capacity with so many moving parts and so many elements is quite remarkable. It's got, like you taken to so many places, have so many characters involved, and it feels like it performs almost flawlessly. I feel like I didn't encounter a single bug that I can remember. I'm sure there were minor ones, but it's like this game is so polished.
Yeah, totally.
And that in itself is achievement, and that's not even going into some of the stuff you guys have mentioned. I think this game, more so than any other game I've played, does its secondary characters justice in a way that is phenomenal. Because Kratos and Atreus' story is obviously at the center of it, and they get their due, but at the same time, I feel like there is not a single side character you meet that doesn't get a story arc that is interesting and keeps you engrossed and makes you want to learn more. And there's a lot of characters in this game, as we will get into. So that's an achievement in itself. And yeah, like gameplay wise, I really enjoyed the first game a lot, to the point where I was kind of unsure how much I would want to play another game worth of that combat, because I was like, how much can they realistically change up? Like, that was probably my biggest worry going into this game, but I think they did a fantastic job of, as I said, introducing enough new elements that I was kept on my toes a little bit. But then also like, just I feel like freshening up the feel of a lot of the combat to the point where you were fighting different types of enemies, maybe investing in different combos a little bit to try and just like the game makes you think on your toes a bit more than the first game, I would say, and that's a cool little adjustment. There's not really too much more I can say without getting into spoilers, but yeah, I think this game is phenomenal, and everyone who worked on it should be very proud of it, because it's not everyone's cup of tea. I acknowledge there are some people that don't like this kind of game, but for me, it is as close to a flawless game as I have played in a long time. Like, because I remember when I finished the game being like, I just physically can't think of something that like I am unhappy with or something I would consider is a flaw in this game, even if I enjoyed it. It's that, and to me, the fact that a game of this size and this scale can achieve that and still also be a fantastic like story and everything, and it's remarkable. So that's my thoughts. I like the game.
Nice.
We're going to jump into spoiler chat now. So again, obviously, if you haven't played the game and plan on playing it, I would highly recommend not listening to this if you plan on playing it and want to be surprised by any aspects of it, because there are some big twists and turns in this game. But that's a sufficient warning. So you can't now complain in the comments and be like, wow, I wish I'd experienced that myself. We told you. You should have done it. Right.
And go do all the side missions.
Go to all the side missions.
Talk about those too.
Yeah. That's a good point to jump off on before we get into like the main story bits. You guys, Josh mentioned he did most of the side missions. I think I finished most of the main side missions. I didn't do much of the post-game stuff. I intended to, but it just kind of fell by the wayside as other stuff happened. Did you do any of the post-game stuff, Stan?
Yeah, I did. I've done a fair bit of it. Purely because I was just really intrigued by the fact that there was still like a few more hours left in gameplay after like the main story. Because obviously spoilers now, but yeah, they mentioned that, you know, parts of Asgard have fallen to other realms, and that there are enemies from Asgard within those chunks that you need to go and defeat. So I think I did most of them. The hardest thing about what comes post like game and story is there's one enemy who's a Valkyrie that you need to defeat. Doesn't matter what sort of army you have, what sort of weapons. It is one of the most like just grueling and like hard aspects of the game. So I've left that.
Yeah.
That can be for a rainy day.
Is this an actual Valkyrie, or is this game's Valkyries like the weird like undead guys? Is this like a separate quest thing?
This is a separate quest thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. She's so on the I can't remember the name of the realm, but it's like the fiery like lava one. It's like Mustafar from Star Wars.
Muspelheim.
That's it. Yeah. So she's in there somewhere. And I just came across her by accident, and she rocked my shit to the point I died like 3 times. And I was just like, whoa, I'm not ready for this. I need to go and level up everything else and then come back at the very, very end. But like the post-game stuff isn't too bad. It is a bit of that thing though where, because like when I played it the first time round, I did a lot of the side quests and missions as I was doing the story. And I think that helped with keeping me invested in the story as well, because it gave me a bit of time to breathe and think about what was happening. So because I had done a lot of that stuff during like the gameplay of the story, once the story was done, I was kind of like, oh, well, I've kind of done everything. Like, I'm not too fussed on trying to clean up some few parts here and there of Asgard. So I haven't kind of gone back to it as much as what I would have thought I would have.
Yeah.
But it's still cool that there are things to do.
Then you also played the entire game again. So you did go back to it.
I did. Only because they brought out photo mode.
Yeah.
And that's why. Because I just wanted some good shots. My only complaint on the game really is the photo mode, because you really can't do much other than just sort of change like the POV, the depth, and add like some filters and stuff. Comparing it to say like the remake of The Last of Us Part 1 that recently came out, that photo mode is like you can change like the way characters are standing, if they're holding weapons or not. You can add literally like spotlights and change the lighting in the scene when you're in photo mode. So I wish they had done or added those aspects of photo mode into God of War Ragnarok, so that it just gave us more options on taking photos, because like it is a really cool feature that I love in games, and there are some shots I've seen from like fans across the board who have played any sort of game, and it's really cool to see what you can do with photo mode. So yeah, I wish there was just more added in terms of features.
Totally. Photo mode stressed me out, man. There's too many things to do. I just want the screenshot, and now games like sometimes they just don't let you just take a screenshot. You have to go into photo mode, and it's like I just wanted to take a pretty screenshot. But I love that you and Will in particular love them, because I get to live that vicariously through you guys.
Yeah, good.
And we have some followers that like to jump into photo mode every now and again.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dolphin and Joshy do it from time to time.
Yeah.
It's great. And we've got like a whole section on our Discord for it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The dark room.
Oh, that's right. Josh, are you planning? You said you're still playing through it. Do you plan to like 100% it, go through all the end game stuff?
I do. I am planning that. So I've 100%ed like 3 areas. The third area that I jumped on was so big. It was ridiculous. So it's the one with the planes. I think it's where
this is the one where it's the entire separate area that you find.
Is it the crater?
So. Yeah, it's
I
think it might be the crater and stuff.
And there's like the lightning
with, like, the dragon where
middle?
Freya's brother is.
That
area.
It's probably that. Yeah,
that's
there's a whole bunch of dragons.
It's in Valheim.
It's so long. There's so freaking.
There's so much to do.
Yeah, see, I played that during the campaign. I found that area. I found that area during the campaign.
Yeah,
and I think when I was talking to you a few weeks,
but then 100%ing it is another because you then flood the area, and so there's all those rivers to then go around, and that unlocks like another double the size of what you've.
Then you've also got to like manipulate time of day in that area as well to do certain things. Yeah, I can only imagine.
It's crazy. Most of the time, I feel like there's not a whole lot that you do during the day that you can't do at night. So I feel like you can just change it to night and get anywhere. Yeah. Which is kind of a bit of a weird thing. Like maybe it's just some enemies appear during the day. And
I think that makes sense, because I think it is more of a tool of when you're playing through the actual like game and main campaign. It's a tool to introduce cool puzzles in there, but I imagine it is a thing where they were like, well, if we want people to go back and do all the extra stuff, maybe let's just have it so that it can work like that, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, have you done? So, have you done many of the post-game side quests? Have you guys both? I assume Sam has. Have you done the quest where you go to the jail in Niflheim?
No, I don't think
have
so.
I done that? No, I have done that. Yes,
you would know.
That's the one with the tree with all the crows. Hey.
Yeah. Jail side quest there.
Yes, that I have done. Yes, it was very interesting.
Okay. Well, I'm going to spoil it for you, Josh, because
that's fine.
It makes sense, and you'll find out. I had this told to me as well before I played through the actual mission, but it's still a cool mission to play through.
Cool.
But basically, in that mission, you go into Niflheim. They're like, oh, it's part of like the Asgard invasions quest line where they're like, oh, a bunch of stuff has fallen from Asgard. This is a jail. And you kind of descend down this jail that has fallen into Niflheim, and not really told what is in the jail. And at the bottom, you find the real Tyr, and talk to him. And then he basically I didn't play much beyond this, but apparently he basically goes off and you can find him in like each of the realms and chat to him in each of the realms. And it kind of goes off to explore and like rediscover who he is. And the reason I'm bringing this quest up is we're working backwards a little bit, but it's a good way to lead it back into the main story, and probably one of the biggest twists and major moments in this game, which reframes basically the entirety of the game as you know it, which is Tyr, who we introduced to at the start of the game, before we free him from a prison in Svartalfheim. Basically, we learned that he has Odin has disguised himself as Tyr for the entire game, and so all our interactions with Tyr up until this point have actually just been Odin spying on us.
Yeah.
And it is... I'm sure some people saw this coming. Like, I personally didn't, but it's also... I feel like even if you could have any hint of this, it's still such an insane reveal, because you then look back at so many moments earlier on in the game, this entire journey you've played through, the Kratos and Atreus and Freya and the dwarf brothers, Brock and Sindri, and all these interactions that Tyr has largely been a part of and largely been present for. And just to put in a whole new context because of this like complete 180 flip of this person who you thought you could have a level of trust in was actually your biggest enemy in this entire game. And I think masterfully done. A fantastic reveal. I don't know. You guys want to talk to that, how you felt in that moment?
Like I didn't see it coming at all. It's definitely like the biggest oh shit moment in a game for me in a very long time. Especially because of like what follows that big reveal.
We can talk about it. We're out of spoilers.
Oh no, totally.
So after we learn that Tyr is Odin, he pretty much like lets everyone know when they're in Sindri and Brock's house. And then pretty much as soon as he turns into Odin, he stabs Brock and kills him. Which was
Brock
just
is the one that's like, who the hell are you? Because whatever you're saying is not right. Like, what the hell is going on here?
Brock is the only one who had a bit of a sense that Tyr was a bit off. Because after playing the game through again, the whole time I was like, I know who you are. I know you're Odin. But the only sort of, it's not even really a tell. It's like, it's the only thing that seems a bit off about him is that whenever you're, so for example, if you're playing as like Atreus and you go off and do your own little thing and then come back to their house, every time you enter the house, Tyr is in a hall cupboard sleeping, and he'll wake up and then come out of the cupboard when you come back. and it's always after either you've been to Asgard to speak to Odin, or like Odin is present in the mission you've just done. So the only really tell is that, oh, he's gone to hide Tyr so that he can then be Odin while you're with Atreus. And then when Atreus is back, he can just be Tyr again and spy on you. And I think Brock's the only one who's like, what are you doing in there? Like, he's the only one that sort of like questions why he's always in this cupboard and why he's always sleeping. But yeah, it was just like, and I think when we did our end of year wrap last year, Ben, I think that was the moment that we were both like, are we thinking of the same thing? Yeah. Because for me, my jaw just dropped. I was like, whoa, because it changed everything. Like, because you realize that every time they've thought of a plan or a weakness towards Odin or a way just to get the upper hand on him, he's known about it the entire time. And as soon as it happens, you realize, oh, these guys have not even got a leg to stand on at the moment. Like, Odin knows everything, and he's going to come at them with full force, and they might not even have a hope at trying to beat him.
Yeah, every time they've gone to one of those prophecies, gone inside one of those murals, he's been there.
He's been there and watched it.
There's a great scene. You can go back and watch it. I went back and watched it on YouTube afterwards. The first time he goes into one of those murals. And you can tell, like, watching that with the context of knowing it's Odin and his reaction when the mural says that, like, something will kill Odin, and you can, like, the expression changes on his face, and it's just so
cool.
It's so impressive that, like, I mean, obviously they knew what was happening in the story when they made the game, but it's like, it's so impressive that now when you go back and look at it, you could, like, all those hints are there, and you can kind of understand, even if it came as a surprise to you during the game, how they were kind of planting those seeds for that reveal, so that now when we look at it and we're like, oh my goodness, that was such a huge reveal, you then go back and, as you mentioned, the cupboard stuff and all these other examples, it still makes sense. It's not just this thing that we're now like, we go back and we're like, don't know if that one works. It does work, and it's incredibly impressive. I also have to echo what you said, that, like, I don't think I've been surprised this much by a game or even a piece of media in a while. And again, maybe that's just like me personally, and like not being able to like predict it as much. But it came out of nowhere. And very impressive. That I've said my piece on it basically. But Josh, do you have anything more to add?
Yeah. Just, you guys have said most of it, but I love the change in Sindri from that moment.
Yeah.
Oh, and how much that affects everyone, and like especially
it's so depressing.
Atreus. Like, Atreus is just wrecked from it, and then for the rest of the game, like, the one thing that I love about this game is that whenever anyone makes a mistake and they rectify it, that hasn't fixed everything.
Yeah.
There's side stories, like when you tear down some of the mining equipment and stuff in that Mimir helped put up, and then there was this big water monster thing in the middle, and he like free that monster and stuff, and Mimir's like, cool, job done, and then he realizes that this thing is not going to leave, and it doesn't feel free. It's been stuck there for hundreds of thousands of years, however long. Yeah. And he's like, it's the first moment that you feel, and it almost feels like the first moment that I've ever felt in like media, in some sort of way, where it's like, I fixed the problem though.
Yeah.
And
even like, Mimir, who is like really old and is like, you would think would be expert to this kind of thing, is like, I fixed it. And Kratos is like, that doesn't mean it. Everything is forgotten.
Yeah. And that happens with Sindri as well. Like, his brother has been killed due to a bunch of actions by Atreus, and he's been trying to do everything that he can to help people save the world. And he says at one point, like, I have lost everything, and I've given you guys everything. Every single thing that I've done for you, you have just taken and ripped apart. Like, and it's like,
totally.
Holy crap, that moment, I think that moment almost hit me harder than than the death of Brock. When
Oh,
you go
totally.
and find Sindri straight away, and you see he's physically just wrecked. It doesn't look like he's slept for weeks.
Every moment with Sindri after that is like genuinely like I felt like so horrible anytime he went on the screen. Not because I was like he's bastard for not forgiving Atreus. I was like, no, this is I get it. Like
you go to the funeral in the post game. At the end and then just disappears, and it's just like
it's a very realistic, like human, like as you said, there being actual consequences for mistakes, even if you fix the problem. It's a very like, again, in a very fantastical world, it's a very realistic approach to relationships, and like the fact that it's not just like an easy switch. If someone that is close to you feels like they have been betrayed by you, that is not something that is, for some people it might be more easily forgivable, but for a lot of people that's not something that you can just instantly deal with, maybe even ever deal with. I think the other testament to that particular part of the game, and it's something we'll touch on a lot, is that I don't think if that had happened to the Brock and Sindri we know in the first game, I would have cared nearly as much. But the character development those two go through across this game is incredible. Sindri a lot via Atreus, spending a lot of time with Atreus as somewhat of a mentor and a companion. And then Brock, we learn more and more about this part of him that is missing, and the fact that he has been returned from the dead by Sindri, but not fully. And this whole interaction he has, I can't remember what it's exactly called, but that weird like mermaid thing in the
when they're making the spear.
And I think that's like, again, the fact that this game manages to make those characters strong enough that by the end of this game, when one of them dies and the other one is left just utterly depressed, it means a lot. Like you're like, this hurts, and these aren't the main characters of this game we're playing.
Like I was going to say, I think, because I was going to say that, Ben, and I think part of the reason why it does hit so hard for what he's going through is that, you know, you do learn that Brock did die recently, and Sindri went to the lengths of getting his soul back. So the like, you knowing as the player that he's gone through such lengths to keep his brother alive, and even that couldn't save him from Odin. It's like it hits you really hard, and and like what you said, every single cutscene or moment with him afterwards is the most like unsettling and uncomfortable thing you have to sit through, because you genuinely just feel so bad for him because he has lost everything. Like the only thing he's got now is his house. That's really it.
But it's not that he's got his house and he's got like his tools, but he's lost his. He feels like he's lost his sense of self, because his entire thing is having like basically a level of OCD over his cleanliness and that kind of thing. But the fact that in these remaining scenes he is just covered in dirt, he does not care about it at all. You were like looking at him and being like, "This is not. You've lost. This is not Sindri. You have lost everything because you have lost Brock. It is not just your like a physical loss. It is like a emotional or mental loss as well."
Like it's so that it's such a destroying part of the game. It's freaking phenomenally done.
And it just all weaves together, man. Like the fact that is tied into like Odin and Tyr, but then is like that story leads into this moment with Brock and Sindri is inherently tied to Kratos and Atreus' story. And we haven't even talked about it at this point, so we're going to talk about it now. But Kratos and Atreus' story in this game, the main two characters, is like phenomenal. I have to be honest, like first game is fantastic and I adore it, but I was very worried at their ability to wrap up the story they've been trying to tell in one more game. When they said that this would only be a duology, I was like, all right, this is going to be interesting, because there is a lot of ground to cover. But I think the game covers it well, and by separating the characters, obviously one of the big things in this game is you play as Atreus. By actually separating the characters and giving each of them their own time to breathe, I feel like it almost covers a lot more ground than it would have if they were together. And yeah, I their interactions remain some of the like greatest in video games. Their father-son discussions, their arguments, their moments of levity. It's just like phenomenal performances, phenomenal writing. Christopher Judge once again just absolutely nailing it. And I have to say, I think his name's Sonny Suljic, the guy who plays Atreus.
Yes.
He was quite annoying in the first game. There's a famous like bit in the first game where he's like just being a little shit kid and not listening to anything. And it's like he's doing like it's a good performance and everything in that. But I was kind of worried. Obviously, the actor grown up a lot since that first game.
Yeah.
Kind of if he'd necessarily be able to like make it feel like it is the same character and make it feel like this character has progressed from the first game. And he also does a fantastic job, I think. Brings a different Atreus, but it's still believable that it is the same Atreus that we know from the first game. I think that says a lot to his performance because he's still a very young actor and still developing a lot, but it's impressive to put in a performance like that. So yeah.
And a very young pro skater as well.
Oh yeah.
I may add to that.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. It's a thing for me where I found that in the previous game, it was a stage, because I think what they've done really well is they've sort of conveyed two different stages in both of their lives as being a child and being a parent. It's in the first one, it's kind of like Kratos is trying to teach him life skills that he will need in his lifetime, and that will be enough to keep him safe and keep the people he loves safe. Whereas in the second game, now it's more so Atreus teaching Kratos that he's done his job. He knows what what he's been taught, and he can now go and keep himself safe. And it's a very I can imagine for a lot of players, it was a very hard-hitting thing, especially if you're playing as a parent, where it's like there is going to come a stage in your life where you will need to have trust in your child that they are okay in this world and they are going to be able to keep themselves and other people safe. So I think they did an amazing job in conveying that. And then, by the end of the game, it's like the way these characters just grow is amazing. So it was a very, very good job.
Like you're totally right. And the scene just before you go to Asgard for the final battle, where Kratos and Atreus share like a moment together in the tent and everything. I'm literally getting chills thinking about it now because it is like the perfect culmination of this journey these two characters have been on and across this entire game, like being at conflict because Kratos isn't able to let go of this protective feeling over Atreus, and then finally getting to this point where he's like, no, I trust what you're doing, even though you've made mistakes. I trust that you have like you have a place of authority within my life, and I can agree with you, like, and I can listen to your plans and that kind of thing. I feel like it's like most people can relate to this somewhat, whether it's as a parent or like as a child having left home and having to like go through that moment of like, all right, like I'm an adult now, or like, all right, you're an adult now. This relationship now needs to change. And it's not that I'm not still your parent or I'm not still your child. It is that we need to evolve how we communicate. We need to appreciate each other for different reasons. And I think it comes back to just this game doing a very good job of telling these really human stories amidst all the like smashing of enemies and all the video gameness of it, which is also great. So yeah, that's kind of largely my thoughts on the two of them. I thought they did a very good job of incorporating playing as Atreus into this game from a mechanical standpoint.
They've continued the single shot as well.
Yeah, that's
transitioning that camera between the two
it's
characters with some. There were some cuts that were very clear and obvious.
Feels somewhat unnecessary at this point, but at the same time, I'm like, look, you doubled down on it and you continued to do it, and I appreciate it.
It would have been weird if they didn't this time.
Yeah, totally.
Why do it in one game and then never again? But it's they did another phenomenal job in keeping the transitions so smooth.
but having Atreus be a playable character, not just for like a small portion of the game. It's not like your Ellie side mission in Last of Us 1. It's like Ellie in Last of Us 2, where you are almost the main character in this game and have an entirely your own upgrade tree, which is pretty fleshed out. And I think they did an incredible job of making his combat work within the system they had made that is largely based around melee combat and is very like close quarters, and then suddenly having this range character who's a lot more nimble and on their feet and that kind of thing, I think is... I was impressed at how much I liked playing as Atreus, because when I started, I was like, oh, this is going to be a bit weird and annoying having to use a bow and arrow in these fights. But by the end, it became this like... it's a different style of gameplay to when you're playing as Kratos, but it's the same concept of cycling through your weapons and like building up combos between the different weapons and that kind of thing. And I'm really impressed with how they did that. Do you guys feel similarly or differently? Because I know it's the Atreus bit wasn't something that everyone enjoyed.
For me, it was a thing like same as you, Ben. I was definitely surprised that I didn't entirely hate it. Like I did enjoy it. And I think something that helps that is the fact that whenever you do play as Atreus, he's leading his own story. It's not... I think if it would be very different where if you stayed in the presence of Kratos and Freya and everyone else, and you were leading that same story, but you would just sort of swap players every now and then, I think then it might get a bit annoying because it's like, well, if you've got Kratos there, people would rather just play as Kratos. But I think because you got to be Atreus, going on his own adventure, seeing new environments that you don't even get to see as Kratos until after the story of the game, I think helped it a lot. And as Atreus, you do uncover a lot more of like lore stuff about the game, which is really cool. Like when he starts to learn more about like the realm of the giants and their history and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there was definitely a lot of aspects that aided in it not being like cringe in a way. So yeah, I think they did really well.
Totally, yeah, I agree. It's kind of setting Atreus in his own journey and in his own places definitely kind of separated that in a good way. And I think having he's basically a vessel to introduce us to an entirely separate part of like the 9 realms in Asgard and all those characters. And I think that is a masterstroke of a decision, because if it had just been Kratos going there and butting heads with like characters like Thor, which are it's actually a very similar character we learn across the game. It wouldn't have resonated so hard, but seeing it all from Atreus's perspective and stuff definitely was great. Josh, do you have any thoughts on it?
I think just to add to it, I loved on probably a bit more of like a minute level, just the little bits of story of Atreus learning how to be on his own. In those bits as well, like, you know, I absolutely loved the first time you go over to a chest as just Atreus. And he tries to punch it in like Kratos does. But his fist just doesn't do it, and he's like, oh man, ow. And then he goes over and like hits it with his arrow instead, or you know, he uses his his bow. Or he uses his bow as like a crowbar on some other ones to crack it open and things like that. Just little bits of kind of funny animations and things like that, or him like, just learning new stuff without Kratos being there to do it for him or to train him through it. I love those little bits, like just the little story elements like that.
Impressive attention to detail. Like that's one of the other things about this game is just like there's all those minor animations and little moments that you're like, you didn't need to do that.
No.
You did. And that again like leans into just how polished it feels like this game is. Like every bit of it feels like love has been poured into it. And the other part about Kratos and Atreus and their story, which we mentioned briefly with Brock, but Kratos gets an entirely new weapon to play with, which I know is a thing in God of War games that they traditionally, you kind of like get a new weapon and like evolve your combat during the game. But I wasn't really sure. I didn't expect it to happen in this game. maybe somewhat naively. I wasn't sure how they would incorporate that into the combat patterns that had previously in the game. But I ended up loving the spear, and I think I used the spear the most by the end of the game. And I love that it has this game has interesting elemental damage systems that were present in the first game, but nowhere near as fleshed out. And then they add a bunch more in this game. And I was kind of like, why are you adding all these systems? It feels like kind of weird and off. And then as you get the sphere, you're able to start siphoning those elements into you and use them yourself and that kind of thing. And I thought it was just a really interesting way to mix up the combat and the gameplay of the game, like halfway through the game when I was like getting a bit sick of swinging my blades and throwing my axes and that kind of thing, and then getting basically like a whole new gameplay style. And like from a lore perspective, having it be this like duplicating ring made into a sword, made into a spear, and then that working into gameplay by the fact that you can just summon a lot of them and then make them like explode and stuff. It's like whoever the heck came up with that, crazy, insane. Like so that is such impressive design.
I was playing on Saturday at my girlfriend's place, and her housemate, who has played the first game, was watching me play this one. Just doing random like post game stuff. Yeah. And he saw me with this spear, and he's like, "Oh, the spear's cool." And then he saw me using it and just throwing. He's like, "Wait, what? How does that even work?" Yeah. And I'm like, "Okay." And I paused the game. I'm like, "Here's how we got that spear, and here's why it actually makes sense." Yeah, and it's like just questioning, like, what? How are you throwing a spear and then you just have it again? Yeah,
it's this funny thing of I can't remember the name of the main director of this game, Eric Williams, perhaps that's it. Anyway, I was listening to a podcast that he was on, and he was talking about how from like a visual perspective, they also had to work in a way that they could have a third weapon without it, because he holds his axe and his spears on his back. And they were like, we needed a way to work in a third weapon without having it like extra clog up the back and just look like he's holding like a whole ass armory on his back. Yeah. So having it be a part of the ring and then like new ones form out of that was like good from that perspective. But just the way they made it all marry in from like a gameplay, but also like making interesting gameplay. But then, as you said, Josh, having it make sense in the world and actually have some level of logic to it is still pretty silly. But like, yeah.
Yeah. I do wonder, like, you being the Norse expert out of the three of us, I would assume. Yeah. Is that ring a thing?
I believe the drop. It's called Dropnir. I think. I believe the ring is a thing. I don't think it ever turns into a spear. I think that was a creative liberty they took, but a very good one. I'm impressed by it. Works. There's. Cool. Yeah, I might mention a few more of these, but there's a ton of little nods to cool Norse mythology bits in this game. The other one, talking of like big Norse artifacts that like a lot of people won't notice, but when you go down into what's it called? I always get these mixed up because there's Niflheim and there's Helheim. It's Helheim. Helheim is the one with the big bird. The big bird, and then Niflheim is the one with the small birds. Oh, it's a little bit confusing. But when you go down into Helheim and you're trying to like free the dog, the giant wolf, it is held on by the chains which are called Gleipnir in Norse mythology, and in Norse mythology they were used again by Odin to trap down this big beast, which in mythology is Fenrir. And at the start of the game, you have Fenrir pass away, and you're kind of like, oh, that's like interesting that they made that choice because he's this big giant wolf within mythology. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I guess it was just like a little nod to it. And then the way they bring that back in later and then put Fenrir's soul inside this dog. Yeah. But then also having all these little things like when you're fighting him, you're using the chains in the fight, and that's like a very famous Norse artifact and all those kind of things. It's just like, as much as this game definitely takes liberties with Norse mythology, because my goodness, there is a lot of weird shit in Norse mythology. And I believe the developers phrased it as, we take like bits from Marvel and bits from actual Norse mythology and then mush them together so they make something that is somewhat representative of the mythology, but also makes a level of sense in a modern world. And do a really good job of it. Because even like Thor's hammer in Norse mythology is not a thing that comes back to you, is not a thing that he can resummon. But they were like, that's a cool thing from Marvel Comics, and that's a thing that everyone can identify with this character of Thor. So despite this Thor being a lot more similar to the Norse version of it, rather than the heroic Marvel version, we're going to bring that bit in so people have that like touchstone for the Thor from those movies that everyone has watched at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm super excited to watch. I think he's probably going to do something on it at some point, but the Javed Sterrett video on this, because his one on the first game was absolutely phenomenal about untangling God of War and how they essentially rewrote Norse mythology, excluding Loki, who exists in nearly every single story in Norse mythology. And they somehow got so many of those stories into the first game. But, you know, things are all slightly different and a little twisted because Loki doesn't exist, because Loki is Atreus. And wasn't there when those stories existed. And so, them continuing to rewrite Norse mythology in that sort of way with having Fenrir as a normal wolf who died, but then as soon as the big wolf came in, I'm like, oh, they're going to do it.
Totally.
They're going to do it. I was so excited about it.
But I didn't even, and this, again, sometimes there are a few moments I look back on and I was like, I should have seen that coming. This is one of those ones where I was like, I should have seen that coming, because I saw the big wolf come in and I was like, oh, it's not named Fenrir. That's weird. It's kind of annoying they used that as a cute little Easter egg in the game. I was stupid. I didn't think about it. It makes a lot of sense in the end.
For sure. And
Yeah,
can I just jump back to the Dropnir ring again?
Yeah.
So I just want to ask if you guys questioned anything at this stage, just before we keep moving on. When Sindri goes down and gets the Dropnir ring, it's like down in this weird mine that they have, and it's just constantly creating new rings. He gets it because it's at the end of a rope or whatever, so that they know which one's which. He unravels it. And then he drops it into the bunch of rings and then picks it up again and then takes it up. And there's like so much focus and so much like attention to the fact that he just dropped it into a mountain of clone rings. And he's like, yeah, this is probably it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, something here is going to go wrong. That is not the right ring, surely. Surely he just messed up. We're going to go on this huge adventure to, like, you know, combine the spear with the ring, and something's going to go wrong, and it's not going to be the right ring and all of that. And nothing happened. I'm so confused as to what that was. I feel like they almost forgot that they did that.
It's a weird little moment, because I definitely remember the camera lingering there for a second.
Yeah. Like you watch him do it, and he's questioning himself when he picks it up again. He's like, I don't know about this, and it's like, ooh, something juicy and crazy is going to happen with that. Nothing, absolutely nothing, and I was so confused. I just thought of it then when we brought up the ring again. When he got it, I'm like, but nothing happened in that part of the story.
Yeah, totally.
So weird.
That is weird. The other cool Norse mythology bit that I wanted to mention, Atreus spends a lot of time in this game with Angerboda, who, again, another fantastic introduction of a character that we didn't know before this game. By the end of the game, fallen in love with.
Great.
And I thought all that stuff in Jotunheim was really well done, and her kind of helping him get in touch with his giant side, and also helping him to understand fate and the way the giants look at it and everything. They have these little balls, which all the giants have kept their souls in. And when we go and fight Angerboda's auntie or whatever, I think it's auntie. Grandma, in this giant. I love the scale of this giant house, and they're kind of going through the small little bits of it. And we have this moment where Atreus revives one of these snakes with the soul of a giant. Which basically in Norse mythology, Loki is the parent of the world serpent Jormungandr that is like the huge giant serpent that we see in the first game and in this game. But in that first game, I think it's in the first game, or it might be earlier in this game. That serpent mentions that it knows Loki and has like spent a lot of time with Loki. And Loki's like, I've never met you before. This makes no sense.
That's really cool.
And basically, they revive this snake. There's an offhanded comment later on from Angerboda about how the snake has been growing in size and stuff. And then at the end of the game, in that final battle, we see the world serpent off in the distance, and it's fighting. I think it's fighting Thor, and basically gets sent back in time in that fight. Yeah.
Oh,
And
crap.
basically that leads to all the other encounters we've had with the world serpent, both like in the first game and earlier in this game, and now like after that moment for the serpent. So it is bringing a tie to this reference in the first game of the fact that the serpent has known Loki for a long time.
That's unreal.
All that kind of thing.
So good.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah. And it's kind of this thing where it's like there's little mentions from the characters within the game of like, the snake like growing and like an offhanded mention when it gets sent back in time of like, so I think someone in the game says something like a little comment about it, but it's this thing of I didn't even necessarily notice it at the time. And then after doing a bit of reading after the game, I was like, that's crazy. You even gave the freaking giant snake who speaks in a different language a cohesive character arc.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that, but that's really cool. I love when they like in anything when that sort of stuff happens. That's sick.
Yeah.
It's like watching all the Marvel movies and then going back and watching them again with the context.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You see like little bits, you're like, oh man, you knew what you were going to do later.
Yeah, totally. And I think the thing, and one of our bigger bones to pick with probably modern Marvel movies, is it feels less and less like either it feels less and less like they know what they're going to do, or it feels more and more like they're really just prepping stuff for the future and it's more obvious. Whereas I think it is clear in this game that even if the whole story wasn't planned out, there were very specific pinpoints that they had when they made the first game that they knew they wanted to hit on in the second game. And it's very apparent that there was like these plans were in place and that there was an overall story they were wanting to tell, even if there were specifics that kind of would come in later. And I know for a fact that I think Cory Barlog said that he knew when he gave this game's director the brief on this game, he was like, there were a couple of things I knew, and it was that he wanted Tyr to be Odin and that he wanted Brock to die. And how they got there was not necessarily like the biggest deal, but as long as those two things happened,
that's interesting.
Yeah, that kind of made sense. And like he said, he had other like specifics of like as bringing in those other stories, but in terms of the main story, those were the two bits he knew that they needed to hit.
Totally. Okay.
It's kind of interesting to frame the rest of the story about that and think about the fact that basically the whole story is serving those moments.
Yes.
In a very impressive way, but it says a lot that that moment had such a big impact on all of it, because it was clearly the moment that they were very much prioritizing within this game. So
for sure.
Very cool. Just on the on Loki getting all the balls with all the giants in it.
Yes.
I expected that to be post game.
Yeah.
Because I was expecting, as we see throughout, well, as we sort of think throughout the whole game, I did think that Kratos was gonna die.
Yeah. They did a very good job of making us think that.
Yeah, because the whole time they're like, oh, he's gonna die, and then Kratos is like, no, we're gonna rewrite our own history and stuff. But every single time they say that, they keep doing what the prophecies say.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, he's probably going to die then, but then he doesn't. Yeah. So they do write their own story in the end.
Yeah.
And so I was expecting the post game to be all Atreus, and then Atreus is going through, and then he gets, he has to go around and figure out what to do with these balls. But yeah, at the end of the game, Atreus is like, I've got to go do this thing, and it almost sets up Atreus for his own game.
Spin-off game,
which I previously mentioned. Javed Starrett. Damn it, I had this already. Previously mentioned Javed Starrett.
Yeah.
Did his own video edit. Image edit of what he thought the spin-off game could be, which is very cool. Here it is. I found it. And he did this within like weeks of the game coming out. God of Mischief.
Sick.
Oh, very good.
That's
very
cool.
Good. I like
it's
that.
Just Atreus with the world serpent in the background.
Yep.
So I think that could be a very cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Spin-off.
I'd be very interested to see. I'm fascinated to see where they go next with this, because obviously they're not gonna give up on God of War or the franchise or Kratos. Like, this is not the end of Kratos. If it was the end of Kratos, they would have killed Kratos in this game. They're like, to me, the active choice not to kill Kratos makes it very clear that they want to tell more stories with him, and probably not within Norse mythology, but elsewhere. And that is very interesting, because I'm like, what more can you do with this guy?
Yeah, you've done Greek and Norse mythology.
But then at this point, they've done such a stellar job, particularly with these two games, that I'm like, I trust that you probably know where you're going. And if it is that there's an Atreus-based game and then they have plans for Kratos down the line, that's great.
I wonder if they're going to do a DLC. They could just
that'd be cool.
Chuck in like a big DLC with Atreus.
Yeah. I think they've said there's none planned, but you never know what that means. That's corporate mumbo jumbo speak.
That's right.
There could be something. Before we maybe touch on that a bit more and wrap up the podcast, just a couple other things I wanted to mention from the game that we probably haven't talked about too much. Two other characters in particular. There's Freya, who plays a much bigger role in this game than I probably thought she would. I could never have predicted she would become a companion.
No.
But it makes so much sense given how she ties into Atreus's gameplay and stuff.
I loved her storyline in this as well.
Yeah, totally.
How, at the start she just cannot stand you, and she tries to fight you basically at the start, and then as it goes, she loosens up a little bit. Like, she's initially just with you because your task is to kill Odin, and that's all she wants, to kill her ex-husband. Yeah. But I loved the slow burn of her just opening up and trusting you more, and realizing that mistakes were made. Yeah. And things like that.
And introducing her brother in this game, I think, was also like very important to that. And again, a character, he dies at the end, right? Am I
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
And dies, who knows? It's off screen.
Yeah.
He falls under a bunch of rubble, from what I remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, having him brought into the game, I think, adds a lot more to her character than her just being the angry mum who's lost her son, which is like very much a direct foil to Kratos, who's the angry dad who has a son. And I think like that relationship and dynamic is explored really well, and like comes to a believable conclusion where she forgives Kratos. But again, similarly to what we mentioned earlier, it has this undertone of like, I think she even says, I can't totally forgive you, but I can live with it. It's like it's not that the mistakes Kratos has made or the decisions he's made don't have an impact, and that he's fully forgiven for them in a very human way. But she's like, we can move on from this. Yeah. And that's like, I think, a very mature way of looking at that kind of storyline. But then having the brother kind of bring in another element of her character and kind of explore her background a bit more is very, very, a very cool thing to do. And then through her brother, we get introduced to all these other freedom fighters from across the realm. I think that's what this game does so well in, as I said earlier, making us love all these characters and feel like each of these characters has a fulfilling arc. It's because they all work into each other's stories so well that what we're actually seeing going on at any one time is about like 4 different characters' arcs, but it feels like each of them is getting their time because they each have relatable elements to each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just want to shout them out. And then I feel like we probably need to touch a little bit on Odin in this game as well, because he is the main bad. And I was fascinated by this portrayal of Odin. It was a very interesting choice. The actor they went for, I think the main thing he's known from is like the West Wing and stuff, but he's very, to me, Odin is a far more like bulky, authoritative figure, whereas this Odin is so timid and
in a way,
quiet, but like
it's very conniving. Like he's
conniving,
really,
concerningly quiet.
He knows what he's doing.
like he is. Sorry,
he's sneaky.
Sorry,
he's so freaking sneaky. It's crazy.
But like when he is in the game, like especially in cutscenes, like if you're walking along with him somewhere, he's like just talking. He's very much more just like this random old man. Like he doesn't seem like this powerful god Odin who is in control of Asgard and has all his power behind his back. But yeah, he just seems like this like frail, normal. I mean, maybe not frail, but just this harmless old man. And I mean, I did enjoy the actor who they had to play Odin, because like he's been in like a few films here and there that I've seen. Just like
in Wakanda Forever as well.
He was, He was also in Man of Steel as one of like the scientists or something like that that they talked to at one point. But it wasn't until after I played the game and I saw someone just had made like a collage on Instagram of like the actor versus the character, and I was like, oh, it's that guy. I was like, oh shit, that's cool. But yeah, no, I think like I was very intrigued by his goal in this game, which was to get all the pieces to that mask and be able to look through that crack and apparently, you know, get all the answers to all the questions of the universe that he's ever wondered. Part of me would have loved to have seen that play out. There was a little bit of me that was like, damn. Yeah, like I would have really liked to have just seen what that was all about and what was on the other side of that crack. No matter what way it went, if it ended up killing him or if it ended up giving him like more power, like it just would have been cool to see. But yeah, no, I think it was very interesting to have him in the game, and in a way where like he was still so good at not giving away that he was Tyr either. Like whenever you were Atreus and you were talking to him in Asgard, like he would not give a single thing away to even hint at that he might know what they're doing or what they're after or what their plan is, which is really cool.
His whole focus when you're with him is always the mask and his
totally, and like even to the point where his goal isn't even to stop Kratos and Freya and the rest of them from like trying to kill him. It's like he just cares about this mask. Like he doesn't mention that whole side of the game at all. Like it's got no worry to him whatsoever, which I thought was really interesting. So yeah, very cool part of the game.
It's scary intelligence, I think, is the main thing.
It makes you
very
confident. Drop your guard.
Everything is loaded with him. Any sentence he says, no matter how serious or like truthful it seems, you're like, oh no, there's something about you that is like, I'm instantly suspicious of everything. But at the same time, he seems like so honest and eager about all the stuff to do with the mask that I'm like, you kind of want to fully trust him in those moments and you kind of want to believe what he's saying. I do think the stuff with the mask and seeing into those realities potentially could come back in future games in this series. It feels like some kind of thread through line that they're trying to seed because they keep jumping between different pantheons and stuff. I could see that happening. It is a weird
the mask of Loki. Like that's a pretty major thing in Norse mythology too.
Totally. It is
very true.
It is one of those.
The mask. The Jim Carrey character.
Jim Carrey's gonna come into the next game.
is one of those weird little story conceits that I'm kind of a little bit hesitant about at the same time, because a lot of fantasy and sci-fi does it where they're like, this is going to help us see through reality. Destiny's doing it right now. And I'm like, cool, but also, what the
You
heck?
just had to get Destiny in, didn't you, Ben?
I did. But yeah, but I think, I just wanted to point out how impressed I was in that performance, but also how surprised I was at like the route they chose to take Odin down, and also Asgard, because I feel like Asgard in this game is also quite representative of Odin himself, and the little kind of joke they put in when you first go there, and Loki, Atreus is like, this is all there is, and they're like, yeah, we don't need it to look pretty, we know the function of it, and like I was like, that's a cool little nod to most of the traditional representations of Asgard we get, which are all about opulence and like giant golden structures and the Rainbow Bridge and stuff.
Yeah.
I like that they kind of took a different trail for all that. I guess to round out this podcast, I feel like
one more thing.
Before
we fully round it out.
Yes.
Do I
you have one more thing?
Now?
Do I? Yeah. Well, I was going to ask a question when we round it out, so you do your thing and then we'll do.
Okay, sweet. I really enjoyed seeing more of Kratos' wife, Faye.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And part of the post game is there's a bunch of these ghosts in various realms, and you go talk to them, and they're like, you know, they died in some sort of war at some stage, and their ghost is hanging around because they have like a partner or a kid or an item or something.
They're mostly in the crater area, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And so many of those interactions, when you, especially in the post game, when you take the item back, or when you meet the other person, like the other partner that they're referring to, that they want to know where they are and how they are, and then they can go off to their heaven and whatever and see each other there. They always have stories about this woman that fought Thor.
Yes.
More and more as the story goes, as you find out more, the more that you get from these characters, the more Kratos is like, this really sounds like Faye. And there is this whole life of Faye that Kratos did not know about.
Yeah.
And the more you do those, it's freaking fascinating. It's so cool to only get this in the post game sort of stuff, and you know, just to find out these extra little bits as you go. And the Kratos is like, I didn't know my wife.
Totally. And it's like, again, a testament to this game. Like, you're learning more about a side character that's barely, like, is present in some cutscenes, isn't even alive in the game. And you still, like, feel like you're coming to know this character more and appreciate that character. Totally. I hadn't even thought about Faye, but the little flashback scenes Kratos has with her are also great and develop
really
upon
and,
like
in his dreams and things.
That kind of relationship and stuff. My question to kind of round this out was, where do you want to see? We kind of touched on it earlier, but where do you want to see the franchise go next? What is your, if it's, you can talk about an Atreus game, or what is your like dream mythology or area you think that would be cool for them to look into next and explore?
Yeah, mine would be the Atreus game, like the one that Javid has made up.
Okay, Sam, you can't talk about the Atreus game.
Oh, okay, I'm so sorry.
But yeah, ever since I saw that picture, that is what made me think that Kratos dies.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, how can Atreus now have his own game if Kratos is still alive? But it makes sense in the final thing that they do kind of split and go their own ways. But yeah, ever since I saw that, I'm like, what could that be? And then by the end of it, I'm like, that's cool. I am now really interested to see where he goes with the these balls with the giants in them, and what story they can make of that. I feel like in my head, it doesn't feel like enough for a full game, which is why I then suddenly thought during this podcast, some DLC. But I am, really intrigued to see where they go with that, whether it's DLC, whether it's a mini game like a Spider-Man Miles Morales, like it's a much
or like a Lost Legacy kind of game. I feel like that could be something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd be keen to see
Yep.
something like that. I don't know much like many other mythologies that they could go to, or where else
Yep.
they could go with this.
Yep.
To explore with Kratos, but
Well,
maybe
Sam?
Sam has an idea.
You pick one.
No, look, I mean, like, I would be very much happy if they sort of stayed where they were, but I
Yeah.
do like the idea of a game that is based around Atreus, but I would love it if it was like a much older Atreus, like on the cusp of being like, because how old is he in this game?
He feels like a mid-teenager.
Mid-teenager,
like
yeah.
15, 16
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, like I would love an Atreus that's in like his like late 20s, who's
Yeah.
like who thinks he's got it all sorted out, but really he's got so much more to learn. I haven't really got much to add on that, but I just want to point out a thing in the game. At the very end of the game, we see that Kratos finds a new giant mural and a prophecy, and on the back of that, the prophecy ends with what I assume to be people now sort of praying to him and praising him as a god for the work he's done for the Nine Realms against Odin. And I thought, like, seeing his reaction to that and how emotional he gets, it choked me up because I was like, holy shit, this is powerful stuff. Because there's even a moment in the game where Odin's arguing with him, I think, and Odin says, like, you've got no idea what it's like to be a real god and have people praise you and pray to you and you know, tell you their worst secrets and blah blah blah. And now he's kind of at that stage where, because of what he's done for everyone by ridding the realms of Odin, it's like people look up to him now as a real god. So I think if there was a game to go forward, I would love to see more of that, sort of see where Kratos, like his new place, kind of fits in the Nine Realms. And kind of to see what comes of him. But yeah, look, anything that's to come, I'll buy and I'll play. So sure.
Totally.
Santa Monica, bring it on. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I totally think there's a world in which we don't get, like, I said earlier, it feels like they're going to make another game of Kratos. There is a world in which that doesn't happen, and I'm sure Sony Santa Monica want to make other games and explore other IPs and stuff. So that's also possible. I think in Atreus, there's a good chance we get some kind of Atreus game. If I was to pick a mythology, though, and like I do think we'll see more of Kratos, and probably exploring Kratos from that sense of people actually worshipping him. But I think maybe that leads to him going to another mythology and exploring what that means to him within a different world and a different environment. And I think I would be really interested in him exploring like Celtic mythology and going kind of, it's an interesting in-between between Roman and Greek mythology, where he kind of started which shares a lot from each other, and Norse mythology. It has similar elements from both, but has also some quite unique elements. So I'd be really interested to see him explore something like that. I mean, outside of that, I think Chinese and Japanese mythology are also fascinating. Each have their own separate elements. I think maybe it's a bit weirder if Kratos shows up in them, but like, who knows? Maybe they can make it work.
For sure.
But yeah, I definitely think there's like areas to be explored there, and I don't think they want to dwell in the Norse mythology too much longer. Like, it does feel like there's an element of closure going on here. In this game, we got to go to all the 9 realms.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like, it's not that they couldn't make another game out of these realms, but it does feel like they want to move on to something else. And if that's another game, that's great. But I totally see a world in which Kratos becomes this vessel to explore those other mythologies, maybe just for like a single game or something.
Yeah, cool.
And becomes a god of war, but like across all these different mythologies, rather than like maybe helping out the people of these different areas and various conflicts. Would be super interesting. But yeah, that's my take.
If they ever like either remake or at least just re-release the first 3 games.
Yeah, totally.
Like, there's references in these games to his other world and stuff, like his other life, previous life in the Greek mythology area. And I would love to play those, but
they're very different games. Yeah,
they are very different, and I don't know if they could get away with re-releasing them because of some of the nature of
The
what
content.
happens in them.
Yeah.
They're very sexual and
Yeah.
very nice to women and stuff. But
Yeah.
in terms of the story stuff in there, like I'm really fascinated by this character and what he's already been through, and I would love to play through those.
I feel like a remake of some sort could be interesting. Like maybe kind of retooling that story. So it still makes sense within the God of War we now know, but maybe with some more modern day mechanics and touches on it.
Or maybe it's like maybe it's like the story of those games, but from the point of view of another character or something, you know, like just something totally different.
Totally.
That would be cool. I looked up Santa Monica as well just to see what else they've made, to see if they have other IP that they can play with. They've made 7 games since 2001.
Yeah.
6 of them are God of War.
Great.
Amazing.
Kinetica is their first game that they made in 2001. Wow. And then there was God of War 2, God of War 3, God of War Ascension, and then the most recent God of War duo.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, I think
I'd be keen
feel
to
like
see what else they can make.
I feel like they've loosely confirmed that Cory Barlog in particular is working on a new IP, and I think they have from those early God of Wars to now, they have ascended the ranks of developers to the point where we now think of them as highly as your Naughty Dogs and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's like they make a new game, everyone will play it, and I would love for them to explore some kind of different theme, different kind of story, different gameplay, maybe even. Because they've shown they can be versatile with gameplay as well, even from those first God of War games to now, which are very, very different gameplay wise. So excited to see what they do next. This game is brilliant. Please go play it if you've listened to this for an hour and 20 minutes and still somehow haven't played the game. We've spoiled a lot of it, but it's still a fantastic game and you still get a lot out of it. So that's all I have to say on it. Any final comments from you two?
I think we're done.
We've said it all.
Alrighty. Well, if you want to catch more of us, you can head to youtube.com/each their own, where we post a bunch of podcast breakdowns, deep dives, reactions, all kinds of things nerdy, video games, comics, TV shows, movies, any kind of thing you like from that. We're probably talking about it. And we do a lot of we've trying to do a lot more of these podcasts. Probably most of them won't be as long as this, because this is a big meaty game to break down. But yeah. And then if you want us in slightly more long form content, longer form than an hour and a half, you can head over to twitch.tv. Wow. I've never stumbled on that one. Twitch.tv/ETT online, where you can catch some of us live streaming various days of the week. Mainly happens on Mondays, Wednesdays, and or Fridays. And then hopefully soon. I'm thinking next Friday, not this Friday, the Friday after. So that's very possible. And yeah, if you want to support us with your dollars, you can head to patreon.com/each their own, pay us a couple bucks, get into our Discord where we have plenty of chats with plenty of people who I'm pretty sure all of them also love this game. Because who can not like this game? William?
Just William.
But for now, I've been Ben.
I've been Sam.
And I've been Josh.
Amazing. We'll catch you all later.